What is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today is a fun one. We're gonna be out on a little local lake over in Brainerd. We're gonna be doing a little bass fishing. Fish have been finally starting to move offshore. I got an episode about purely like locating offshore structure and stuff like that coming up, so don't worry, we're gonna dive deep into that. Before we do, we're gonna talk a little bit about the best bottom contact baits that a guy can use while being out on the water, and some tried and true stuff that I've learned over the years that works really well. Ooh, there's a deep weed edge right there. Right now what we're doing is we're kind of just driving around looking at grass, just kind of getting an idea of what we're working with. I'm dropping a couple waypoints down on weed lines, but the bass really get offshore and on these weed lines. So we're gonna go cruise around a little bit and we're gonna go out and try and locate some bass. Here we go. All right, guys, we just picked up Ron and we are going down this point, or actually it's a big offshore piece of structure, and we're just looking for weeds. The same thing that I was doing just a minute ago. And right now I'm flipping a jig and Ron's flipping a craw tube. The grass is really is not growing evenly, obviously. So we kind of just been cruising around looking for like the best stuff that we can find. So in summertime, as far as like moving bait or bottom contact baits go, there's 3 baits that I'm gonna have up on my deck pretty much for like the entirety of the season. That's gonna be a jig, a Texas rig, and a jig worm. And we're gonna give you guys like more of an in-depth look of like the setups and stuff like that and how we use them in certain situations. But right now it's a little early in the year for me to like really pick up a jig worm. Like yesterday I threw it a little bit, but for the most part you can live and die by a jig and a Texas rig for the first part of the summer before things start getting really tough. So fish are just starting to get in their like summer patterns. And for largemouth fishing, this is almost like the best time. Like pre-spawn is really good, but they're dirt shallow. And now post-spawn, it kind of took them a while to get out here this year as far as our central area goes. I know down in like the metro area, they were fishing offshore like weeks ago. And here in town, or in the Brainerd area, they just have not been. Ooh, here we go. Here's some good grass. There's a lot of it too. But here in the Central Lakes area, they just have not been setting up on the offshore stuff until like pretty recently. And that could be a lot of different things. You know, I think that it's all the rain that we got this year. It's made those areas, it's made areas that we've experienced droughts in throughout the year to hold a lot more depth, and they really don't have to go anywhere, because in a lot of areas the grass seemed to grow pretty good. We just have had really low sunlight this year too. We've had a lot of rain, a lot of cloud cover, and in some areas I guess the grass is growing good, in some areas it's not. But as compared to last year, I feel like this year is way better. I think I just got one. Yep. Not a big one. Realistically, the best thing that you can do is find like the best looking weeds on the whole flat, and that's where most likely a lot of the bass are going to be. You can catch one here and catch one there, but if you want to find like the absolute money where like the whole school lives, you're gonna have to find geez, this thing, he got it. You're gonna have to find the best grass in order to find like the biggest schools, in my mind. Now we probably get on this thing and flip like the entire thing, but I think it was this way. There's another one. Oh, there he goes. Dude, really?
I don't know, find it.
Now, a couple different things that you can do is you can use, like, I like using live scope to check these grass patches to see if there's a bunch of bait around, because obviously the bait's really going to keep the fish congested in that area and make them not want to move. And so sometimes that's even more important than finding like the best looking grass. But oftentimes that bait is going to go to like where the foliage is going to be the greenest, just because of the microlife and stuff that they feed on. It's going to attract them to those areas. It's going to attract them to those areas, and for these bass, they're going to stay by them, especially being that like they kind of just gone through the spawn. They're feeding up for the summer, and they are pretty active. I've been catching some pretty fat ones lately. Tells me that they've been post spawn for a minute now and finally feeding. But I'd say like as of a few weeks ago, the largemouth fishing was pretty tough. You know, you're going out and only getting a few bites a trip, and they're just not snapping, and they don't seem to be like in their summer spots as of a couple weeks ago. But now it seems like the water's finally got to where it needs to be. Yeah? Okay. He gave me some attitude. Not a big one, but okay, Ron's flipping a T-rig, I'm flipping a jig.
They're liking the jig a little bit better.
Just a little bit, but realistically though, I personally feel like a jig is gonna get bigger bites through and through, but that T-rig can just be the money sometimes. And it's kind of funny, me and my buddies joke around, sometimes they want rubber and sometimes they want it hard, and it's all about figuring out that deal. But for me, I typically will lean on that T-rig when the veg gets really ultra congested and you can't really get a jig through. But what a smart man once told me is there ain't no job a jig can't do. So sometimes, like an experienced jig fisherman, I've seen some guys be able to flip in some really congested stuff, and I'm not one of them. I kind of lean on that Texas rig once it gets congested, but sometimes, like I said, they just seem to bite that T-rig just a little bit better. And it's not that they can't catch big fish, but for the jig, like my favorite weight to use, I have two weights that I like to use for a jig, and that's 3/8 and 1/2 ounce. But I know a lot of guys that like primarily flip 5/8, 3/4 ounce. I know one guy that flips an ounce jig primarily, and he catches the hell out of them. So it's all about what you're comfortable with. Oh yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier. So before I picked up Ron, I was talking about like practice for tournaments and stuff, and that's when like you would really want to up that jig size. So if I was practicing for a derby out on this lake, I would have like a 5/8 or like even a 3/4 ounce flipping weight, or probably a flipping weight, just because I feel like I get more bites than with the jig. And what I would do is I would just move this water a heck of a lot faster. I probably would have scanned all this first and then just started fishing the best looking stuff that I could find and flipping it with like the heaviest jig or the heaviest T-rig setup I got, and kind of just going over it really fast. And every single time I catch a fish, I drop a dot on it. And then when I come back tournament day, I would go to those best looking spots and I would tie on a 3/8 just to hit those areas like really good, to make sure that I get the most out of them. But today we're just like out fun fishing, and you don't really got to be crazy about it. So I'm just flipping like my go-to size. Whoop, sorry, stop. I hit the go button by accident. Now Ron's the jig master. Like, it's very rare that I pick it up before him, but this year's been kind of weird because I got another buddy that I fish with that like always uses the jig, and we've gone out like several times this year and I've picked it up way before him. And so far, like, this has been like my go-to way to catch them this year. I've caught them really good on the jig. They've just been eating it. One of two things happened. Either A, these fish really like the jig a heck of a lot better than they did the year before. There we go. Look at the size of him.
Woo!
Or I'm getting just a little bit better at it. I don't know. We're gonna find out. Ooh, there's a little step up over here. What's really nice about live scope is just being able to see like all the little differences in the grass, like the little humps and stuff like that. Yeah, you need that, dude. Like, you don't, but
It's just another tool.
like the other day when I was out on that smaller lake that we met on, like, dude, I could see them. They were so far off the grass and they were just chilling on this, like, it goes down like this, and then like there's this one area where there's like a platform and then it drops down, and they were sitting on that little deal, and there's like 8 of them, and I'd catch one and I could watch them all just scattered. And so I'd back off of it and I'd just watch them, and eventually they'd regroup, but it'd take like 5-10 minutes. And like for tournament fishing, I mean, you have that down, you can sit on a school all day and just be really conservative with them and not be bombing. You know, you just know all the right baits to throw at them, and you don't got to worry about, you know, cycling your baits and picking up like a moving bait and dragging the whole school to your boat. You know, that's not a good idea.
Just pick them off.
So you pick up a jig worm, catch one, catch a 4-pounder, box it, back way the hell off of them for like 5 minutes, and then poke yourself back up on top, and they all regroup. But if you sit there and freaking cast and cast and cast, they just evade the area.
Yeah.
That's some juice. I shouldn't have even said nothing about that. That's honestly just like a really sneaky way to use live scope and practically cheat with it.
Don't say cheat and live scope too close together.
Oh yeah, they might get mad.
Get blocketed.
The internet will get mad. All right, I'm gonna flip
Sounds
this.
like a block it statement.
Spotlighting. You know, and all these guys do is just spotlight with their weenie worms and sissy sticks. Well, the only thing I got to say to that is, dude, these guys are winning Elite Series events and Bassmaster Opens. Well, you sit in your little cave and comment about it. So everybody wins. Like, he gets the check from the views. And my top 3 bottom contact setups for the season, and this is going to be used basically, when I say for the season, I mean in the summer months. So this is going to be used a lot during the months of July, August, September, even going somewhat into October, and they're non-moving bait presentations. Now, this can be, there's a million different ways to go about this, but I'm going to generalize just so that we don't take up like an hour of your guys' time. So first off, I'm gonna start off with the Texas rig. Texas rig's a super common setup here in Minnesota. There's a lot of different ways to do this, but this is how I like to do it. And I have 2 different ways that I'm gonna show you guys. The first one's gonna be when I'm flipping in moderate to heavy cover grass. And that's gonna be with this setup right here. I'm using braid to leader on this 30-pound braid to 20-pound fluorocarbon, and then I'll show you guys my weight. So here's the setup right here. I got a crawmatis craw on the back. Sorry. Then I got my flipping weight, and I got my sinker stop. And the hook that I'm using is a VMC wide gap hook, and if you guys can see, there's the ring on the top of that, and it really lets that bait move a lot more freely, I feel like, than just your standard wide gap hook. I started using these about 4 years ago, and I've never bought another style hook since then. You won't see me using like those really strong, sturdy jungle hooks, owner jungle hooks, unless I absolutely have to flip like really hard or really heavy stuff. But the whole setup kind of works together. So we got a medium heavy rod mixed with the braid to fluorocarbon. It really does give you the leverage that you need to get those fish out. And basically you could do this one of 2 ways. You could do this with braid to leader, or you could do it with all 20-pound fluorocarbon too. But for the heavier stuff, I'd rather go with braid to leader. And then I will flip like the edges of weed lines and stuff like that with pure 20-pound fluorocarbon. So that's another way to go about it. And the weights is another thing to talk about. So when you're running your weight selection, a lot of times the fish are going to tell you what they're going to respond to better and what they're not going to respond to. So sometimes they want a slower fall, sometimes they want the bait to literally fall right on top of their face and dart through the water. That's when I would go up to like a 3/4 ounce tungsten weight or a 5/8 ounce tungsten weight. And you know, depending on the situation, as summer starts to progress, so as we get into like those August months, I really feel like those fish respond a lot better to more slower falling stuff. And that's when I'm going to lean really heavily on like a 1/2 ounce or a 3/8 ounce weight, so that it really slows that fall down and those fish will actually eat it. Now, it's kind of the same thing with the jig too, and we'll get into that in just a second, but the Texas rig can be, you can use any kind of bait that you want to. So sometimes I might use like the Samatis stick on it. Sometimes I might even downsize this craw into like more of like a 3.5-3-inch bait, and downsize my hook too as well and go into like a 3/0 hook. But that's how I like to rig my Texas rig. Next, we got the jig. And this is the Outcast Tackle Juice jig. We also got the Stealth Fighter too that everybody knows about right here. And on the back of it, I just have a crawmatis on the back, and that color is called Magic, Green Pumpkin Magic. And this is probably like my favorite color. So when it comes to using any style jig or any plastics period, any variation of green pumpkin's probably going to be my favorite. So this juice jig is very, very beat up. I've caught a lot of bass on it. I've used it probably the past 2-3 days, and that hook is still like uber sticky sharp. But I got a green pumpkin crawmatis on the back of it, and then this is a 1/2 ounce jig, peanut butter and jelly. And I don't think you need a purple and brown trailer, even though it'd probably look just a little bit better, but I just run that green pumpkin. But basically for this setup, I'm using a mag heavy 7-foot rod. It's really sensitive, and part of that is comboed with the fluorocarbon. I think that when you're running a full spool fluorocarbon like that, that's 20-pound Daiwa Samurai fluoro. Whenever you're running that full spool fluoro, you want an ultra sensitive rod, just so that you can actually feel the bite and you don't have to lift up and feel the fish bite it. You can more or less feel the bite, and that way the fish doesn't know that you're pulling on them at all. 7-foot, mag heavy, 20-pound fluorocarbon, Daiwa Tula 7-1, and that's gonna work perfect. And like I said, the summer months, I'm gonna use like that 1/2 ounce to 5/8 ounce, and as the summer months progress into your August time, end of July, August time frame, I'm probably gonna go down to like a 1/2 ounce, 3/8 ounce size weight, just to slow that fall down and probably get a few more bites than I would if I was gonna throw like a 5/8 ounce to an ounce weight style jig. The next one that I got is a jig worm setup. It's gonna catch you some bass in the long run, and especially when the times get really tough. Like today, the bite's not the greatest, and I probably should have pulled this thing out a long time ago. I got a Samatis stick on the back of it. I'm actually using a Ned rig on this one, but I'll show you what the money jig looks like. That's actually made for jig worming. Oop. Basically, I got a braid to leader setup, and the best I think for jig worming is going to be 12-pound test braid to like a 10 or 12-pound test fluorocarbon leader. 3000 series spool to a 4000 series spool reel. So I'm using a Daiwa Tula 3000 LT on this rod. It's a 7'3" medium rod, ultra sensitive. I think that you need a sensitive rod for jig worming too as well. And you get a lot of bites with this thing. I'm looking for weed lines, not super congested grass, but I do like fishing weed lines with this primarily, especially in really clear water. Deep weed lines too, like 18 to 26 feet. It's gonna work, it's gonna stand out big time amongst your Texas rig and your jig worm. And as the season progresses, this is only going to become a lot more effective. Like if you're a co-angler fishing in Minnesota or Wisconsin area, anywhere where there's grass, if you're a co-angler, this is a perfect way to get bit. And I feel like you're going to get more bites with this than you are with like a wacky style weightless bait. in the summer months. So those are kind of my setups. And then here's another way that you can rig this jig worm. I don't do it this way very often, but I'll show you my buddy's setup. This is a bait casting setup, and he's got it rigged up. He's got a braid to fluoro leader, and then he's got his jig worm right here. And this is actually a pretty heavy head. That's a 3/16 ounce head. He uses it on a bait casting setup, so you can do that. Now, if you're gonna use it on a bait casting setup, I strongly suggest using the money jig, and I'm gonna show you guys why here. So if you guys look, Outcast Perfect Net is just a circle, and it doesn't have those like puck style edges. And then if you look at our money jig, I'll show you guys, I'll unthread the worm. If you look at our money jig, look at that spear hook keeper on the bottom of it. That is giant in this, because what it does is it provides a good sturdiness to the hook, so you're more or less likely to bend this thing out. And so that's kind of the big difference. It's the same hook that they use in the Ned, it's just the hook shank or the keeper for the bait is just much different. So that's why I really strongly suggest, if you're going to truly jig worm, not to use a Ned rig, especially if you're going to throw it on a casting setup. Definitely use the jig worm. Now the next important thing with when you're going to use a casting setup is to use lighter line. So like same thing as your cast or your spinning gear setup. You know, use like 12-pound braid to a 12-pound leader is probably going to be perfect. You could even go up to like 15-pound, but once you start getting into that 20, 30-pound, if you set the hook really hard, which most people do when they're using a bait caster, you're going to bend that hook out. Like there's a really good chance you're going to bend the hook out. So definitely lean on lighter line if you are going to put it on a bait casting setup. Those are my favorite top 3 bottom contact setups that I'm going to have on my deck at all times this summer. All the baits that you guys have seen in this video, all the baits, all the jigs and everything, even the tungsten, I'll have it linked down below. You guys can click it. There's direct links going straight to Omnia for some of this stuff. And then as far as the Samatis Baits goes, you guys can get it right directly off of our website. So I got a promo code down below that gets you a little deal on it, and anything that's purchased in this video does help my channel out. If you guys are looking to book a guide trip, you guys can message me on any of my social media platforms or even email me and I'll get back to you. I'm doing a special rate on largemouth trips through the months of July and August, so message me to find out the details on that. Other than that, my last deal is going to be about the rods that I've been using. So as you guys know, for the last few years, I've been with Toxic Rods. I can tell you guys what, Ted puts out a great product. He's the owner of the company. I wouldn't have been using them up until this point if I didn't truly believe in them. Just like a lot of things in life, guys, like partnerships do come to an end. So him and I have decided to part ways, and it wasn't over nothing bad. Like, I'm still friends with the guy, and we still talk here and there, but I definitely have decided to move forward. The only reason why I'm mentioning this is because I get a lot of messages throughout the weeks of people asking me like what types of rods to buy and stuff like that. I've been just giving people a general idea of what I would buy outside of this rod lineup, and then that leads to follow-up questions. So I figured I would just throw it out there that if I'm mentioning other brands of rods, it's nothing bad. It's already been talked about and everything like that. I just wanted you guys to know. So as far as these rods go, they're great rods. In any of these lineups that I've talked about with these rods, I would probably lean on anything from Daiwa, G Loomis, Shimano. They all make fantastic rods. There's a bunch of other ones that outside of those companies that I'm not naming that make good stuff too. So other than that, until next time, guys, we'll see you on the water.